The Dead Hand System. Dead Hand, known in Russian as perimeter, was the Soviet Union's ultimate insurance against a surprise nuclear attack. Created in the early 1980s, during the most dangerous years of the Cold War, it was conceived as an automated doomsday system, a machine designed to guarantee retaliation even if Soviet leaders were eliminated in a first strike. The system monitored clear indicators of nuclear war. It tracked seismic tremors from missile impacts, sudden radiation surges, drastic atmospheric pressure changes, and the loss of communication with military command centers. If these signals appeared together, Dead Hand could activate. Command missiles would then transmit launch orders directly to Soviet nuclear forces, removing human decision-making from the process. This design ensured that even if the Kremlin and senior military leadership were destroyed, the Soviet nuclear arsenal would still respond. The result was what strategists called mutually assured destruction, a balance built on fear. For years, the Soviet Union denied Dead Hand's existence, labeling it Western fantasy. Only after the USSR collapse did former officers confirm the system was real, and that parts of it may still exist in some form today. Tsar Nuclear Test. Tsar Bomba was the Soviet Union's ultimate display of nuclear power, the largest and most powerful weapon ever detonated in human history. Officially labeled RDS-220, it was developed in the early 1960s under physicist Andrei Sakharov, intended as a message to the world that the USSR could deliver destruction on an unimaginable scale. The bomb weighed more than 27 metric tons, so enormous that the Tu-95 bomber carrying it had to be heavily modified just to hold it. On October 30, 1961, Tsar Bomba was released over the remote Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Arctic. To limit radioactive fallout, its original 100 megaton design was reduced to 50 megatons, still over 3,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. When it exploded, the fireball expanded nearly 8 kilometers wide. The shock wave circled the Earth 3 times, breaking windows more than 900 kilometers away. The mushroom cloud climbed 64 kilometers into the stratosphere. Even at reduced yield, the blast was so extreme that no realistic military target could justify its deployment. Tsar Bomba became both a technological achievement and a chilling symbol of Cold War excess, proving that nuclear rivalry was driven as much by spectacle as necessity. It stood as a terrifying benchmark, reminding humanity how close unchecked ambition and fear could push the world toward irreversible catastrophe during that era. Before the next deadly project, subscribe for more untold dark history. Ivy Bells Surveillance. Operation Ivy Bells was a joint U.S. Navy and NSA mission that pushed Cold War espionage into one of the most inaccessible battlegrounds, the ocean floor. In the early 1970s, American intelligence discovered that the Soviet Navy relied on undersea communication cables to transmit sensitive military messages between bases on the Kamchatka Peninsula and the Soviet Pacific Fleet headquarters in Vladivostok. These cables were laid along the seabed in Soviet territorial waters, where they were assumed to be safe from interception. The mission was simple in theory, but dangerous in execution. Crews had to reach the cables, tap them, and record everything without detection. The submarine Us Halibut, specially modified for deep-sea surveillance, was sent into Soviet waters under strict radio silence. Navigating treacherous icy depths, the crew located the cables and attached a sophisticated recording device that could capture weeks of conversations without disrupting the signal. Every month, U.S. divers returned to retrieve the tapes and replace the power supply. The operation yielded an unprecedented stream of high-value intelligence, including unencrypted discussions about Soviet naval operations, weapon systems, and command protocols. For nearly a decade, the tap remained undiscovered. Its success ended abruptly in the early 1980s when Ronald Pelton, a former NSA employee, sold the secret to the Soviets. The cable was pulled from the seabed and Ivy Bells was terminated. Even though it was compromised, Operation Ivy Bells is still remembered as one of the most daring and technically challenging espionage feats of the Cold War. Project MK-Ultra. MK-Ultra was among the most secretive and controversial programs in American history. Launched by the CIA in the early 1950s, it sought to explore whether the human mind could be controlled. U.S. officials feared the Soviet Union and China were advancing psychological warfare, and Washington wanted to stay ahead in what became known as the mind race. The program operated behind layers of secrecy. Using a web of front organizations, the CIA funded experiments at universities, hospitals, prisons, and military facilities across the United States and overseas. Some methods appeared scientific, others deeply disturbing. Unwitting subjects were given high doses of LSD, placed in prolonged sensory deprivation, subjected to hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and intense psychological stress meant to shatter mental resistance. Many participants never consented, and some never even knew they were part of an experiment. One notorious sub-project, Operation Midnight Climax, involved CIA-run safe houses disguised as brothels. Agents watched men through one-way mirrors while secretly dosing their drinks with hallucinogens, carefully recording their behavior. By the mid-1970s, investigations exposed fragments of MK Ultra, but most records had already been destroyed. The program was officially terminated in 1973. Its legacy endures as a chilling reminder of how far governments may go in the pursuit of control. It remains a dark chapter etched into Cold War past. Chrome Dome Air Patrol. Operation Chrome Dome was one of the most intense and dangerous missions of the Cold War, a U.S. Air Force strategy designed to keep nuclear-armed bombers in the sky at all times, ready to strike the Soviet Union at a moment's notice. Beginning in 1960, at the peak of nuclear tension, Strategic Air Command launched fleets of B-52 Stratofortress bombers on continuous rotation, each carrying multiple thermonuclear weapons. The logic was simple, but grim. If the Soviets destroyed U.S. air bases in a first strike, these airborne bombers would still be able to deliver immediate retaliation. Every day, the massive aircraft flew long, looping routes over the Arctic, the Atlantic, and near Soviet airspace, never landing until another bomber took its place. The missions were exhausting for crews, often lasting up to 24 hours, and carried immense risk. A single accident could mean disaster, and accidents did happen. In 1966, a B-52 collided with a refueling tanker over Spain, releasing 4 hydrogen bombs. None detonated, but 2 spread radioactive contamination. 2 years later, another B-52 crashed in Greenland, scattering nuclear debris across the ice. Each incident sparked international outrage, yet the operation continued for years under the belief that any pause in airborne readiness could leave the United States vulnerable. Operation Chrome Dome was eventually phased out in 1968, replaced by faster response missile systems. During its run, it came to symbolize the Cold War's constant state of alert, a world where every hour, day, nuclear war was minutes away. Moon Detonation Project. Project A-119 was one of the Cold War's most daring and bizarre proposals, a secret U.S. Air Force plan to detonate a nuclear bomb on the Moon. Conceived in 1958, at the dawn of the space race, the project was designed not as a weapon of war, but as a spectacle. American military planners feared that the Soviet Union's early space achievements, including the launch of Sputnik, were tipping the balance of global prestige. A nuclear explosion on the Moon, visible from Earth, would be an unmistakable display of American dominance in science, technology, and raw power. The plan called for a small, lightweight nuclear warhead to be launched aboard a modified missile, timed to detonate on the lunar surface so that the flash and resulting dust plume would be visible to observers on Earth. Scientists calculated the blast would have no lasting effect on the Moon's orbit or surface stability, but its psychological impact on the world could be enormous. Physicist Leonard Riefel, who led the study, later revealed that a young Carl Schon had worked on the project, tasked with modeling how lunar dust would disperse in the Moon's low gravity. The plan was ultimately abandoned in 1959, partly due to fears that the public would react with outrage, and partly because the risks of a launch failure were too great. The Azorian Recovery Mission. Project Azorian was one of the Cold War's most ambitious covert missions, a CIA effort to raise a sunken Soviet ballistic missile submarine from the depths of the Pacific Ocean. In March 1968, the Soviet submarine K-129 vanished while patrolling northwest of Hawaii, plunging more than 16,000 feet below the surface. The Soviet Navy searched relentlessly, but never found the wreck. The United States, however, located it using deep-sea surveillance. The CIA recognized a rare opportunity to recover not only the submarine itself, but also its nuclear missiles, cryptographic equipment, and valuable intelligence on Soviet naval technology. The challenge was immense, lifting a 2,000-ton submarine from extreme depths without alerting Moscow. The solution was a massive custom-built recovery ship known as the Hughes Glomar Explorer. To the public, it appeared to be a deep-sea mining vessel funded by billionaire Howard Hughes to collect manganese nodules from the ocean floor. Hidden inside was a giant mechanical claw designed to seize and lift the wreck in total secrecy. In the summer of 1974, the Glomar Explorer reached the site and began the delicate recovery. The mission achieved only partial success. During the lift, much of the submarine broke apart, and only a section reached the surface. Inside were 2 nuclear torpedoes and the remains of 6 Soviet sailors, later buried at sea with full military honors. The operation stayed classified until leaked in 1975. The Paperclip Program. Operation Paperclip was one of the most morally complex efforts of the early Cold War, a secret American program created to recruit former Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians after the collapse of the Third Reich. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union raced to secure Germany's most advanced technology and the minds responsible for it. From rocketry to aeronautics to chemical weapons, these specialists held knowledge capable of shaping global power for decades. The U.S. Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, operating under the newly formed Department of Defense, identified hundreds of German experts to relocate to America. Many had belonged to the Nazi Party, and some had served in senior positions within Hitler's war machine. Their wartime work included the V-2 rocket program, technology that had devastated London yet would later become the foundation of the American space program. Under Paperclip, these scientists were quietly transferred to the United States, while their personal records were altered to conceal Nazi affiliations from public view. The most famous recruit was Wernher von Braun, who later became the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that carried Apollo astronauts to the moon. Others contributed to ballistic missile systems, military aircraft design, and advanced weapons research programs. Before we uncover the next hidden chapter of history, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more dark history secrets.